U.S. Homeland Security requirements imposed on Canada. The U.S. is now dictating North American air travel security. Without much fanfare and overshadowed by Canadians heading to the polls on May 2nd for the fourth election in 7 years, a controversial bill that would further comply with U.S. aviation security practices became law. The measure supports plans for a North American security perimeter and illustrates how the Canadian government is more interested in appeasing U.S. interests than protecting the privacy and freedoms of its own citizens. The U.S. Secure Flight Program is part of the Department of Homeland Security, and they basically bullied Canada into this measure that is called the Secure Flight Program. And what that is that requires a large amount of your personal information to be transmitted directly to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, even if your flight only passes over the United States. So even if you're not stopping in the United States, any flights to or from Canada might be severely affected. It's just amazing. Our severely flawed Made in Canada no-fly list was supposed to prevent the imposition of the U.S. list on Canada. But the benchmark has moved again to point the U.S. must issue travel permissions to Canadians. The Conservative government has failed to sufficiently safeguard the privacy of Canadians. Personal information collected could be used for immigration as well as law enforcement purposes and could also be shared with other countries. Bill C-42 surrenders Canadian authority to the Department of Homeland Security. Isn't that interesting? So, even before this went through and became law, there was an incident of a British man who was traveling with his family from Toronto back to England, and he was denied permission to board a plane because his name was on the U.S. no-fly list. Had nothing to do with him flying in and out of the United States. He was traveling from Toronto back to England. He was stranded for several days until the British Embassy intervened and helped him to get back home. At the time, the Canadian Civil Liberties Association pointed out that Bill C-42 hadn't even yet passed. But if aircraft carriers are providing passenger information to U.S. secure flight for overflights, then it would seem the aircraft carriers may be acting as if Bill C-42 was already in law. So, boy, talk about the United States imposing their martial law on another country. It's like it's not enough that we have the NAFTA and the North American free trade and open borders and everything else. Now we have actually bullied Canada into these kind of requirements that are imposed on Canadians. There are real concerns on how civil liberties are being eroded by these new security measures. Canada has further surrendered privacy and sovereignty when it comes to air travel. So ultimately now the U.S. has complete and ultimate power in deciding who is allowed to enter and who is allowed to leave from just about any country. God bless.